And the story that I want to mention of Imam Sa'di with Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. Imam Sa'di was teaching Qaid al-Rajab, which is a book in Qaid al-Fiqh by Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah. And a lot of students were attending in the beginning. But by the end of the book, because the books are very, maybe find in one volume, but it's a really thick book. By the end, there was only one student remaining who finished the book with Imam Sa'di, and he was Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. And as a prize, at that time, in the area that we were from, obviously they didn't have internet. Imam Sa'di gave Ibn Uthaymeen as a prize an apple, just an apple. And that's something Ibn Uthaymeen had not seen before at the time. But the point being is that he had patience and he remained till the end whilst everybody else left and everybody else, gave up. And everyone has their own excuses. But the point being is that Ibn Uthaymeen remained till the end. And then we all know now the legacy that Ibn Uthaymeen has left behind. So sometimes it can be difficult. I know the lessons are long for us after Isha, but it requires a lot of patience to really learn. In Yahya bin Abi Kathir, who was the Tabi'i, he said, and it's narrated by Imam Muslim, لا يستطاع العلم براحة الجسم, that you can't attain knowledge by the relaxation of the body. Meaning, by you're relaxing, you want everything to be easy, it's never going to learn. That true knowledge is you put in a lot of effort. And like we studied the documents on hadith, we studied how some of the Salaf would travel for months just so that they could learn one hadith or just so that they can authenticate one hadith. And another good fact that regarding this narration of Yahya ibn Abi Kathir is that it's mentioned by Muslim, but it's mentioned under the book of Salah, under the chapter of the timings of Salah, Mawaqit of Salah. So the ulama, when they came to explain this quote or the statement of his that you can't attain knowledge, or knowledge is not attained with the relaxation of the body, they were confused. Now, what has this got to do with Salah? And I remember in his explanation he mentions, he's quoting that if you actually look at the amount of narrations, because remember we took the Imam Muslim, he brings the same hadith, different change of narrations, and with all the different changes. For example, Bukhari was mentioned once, the part of the hadith that's needed and move on. But Imam Muslim, he brought a number of narrations, different changes of narrations for the same hadith. Normally, if you would, it would be 2, 3, but for this, I found the exact number, maybe approximately 10. I imagine 10 different changes of narration, how many places did you have to travel for that? And that's for just one hadith. So when the ulama explained this statement, they say that the reason Imam Muslim he wrote this here is to show to the people that these 10 narrations that I've got for you that are easily found on one page now, this is not something that I just got overnight. I have to put a lot of effort into researching, into memorizing, into traveling and so on, so that I can attain this knowledge. And now we know the status of Imam Muslim in the religion of Islam. So likewise, you have to put in a lot of effort. And in Medina, the Sheikh, some Riyadh, his name is Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi. Now, he's from Riyadh, but every year, annually, in Medina, during the winter break, he has a Dawrah. And that Dawrah is 8 days, and he goes through 15 books. And the timing is after Fajr, starts from Fajr for about 4 hours, from Fajr to about 10 a.m. And then there's a little break, and then again from Asr all the way until about 2 hours after Isha. So, today we're doing something similar. Not doing the Fajr part, but we're doing the Asr after Isha. And, if you can't do exactly like 10, then, we try to emulate at least possible. Alhamdulillah, I remember when I attended my last year of Medina, I think there were about 6,000 students that attended. And that was not just Arabs, people from India that have come, people from different countries have come to study from the Sheikh. And it wasn't like, the Sheikh very technical. So, how we do those students, lessons are like that. So it's not just a nice reminder, comfort, you have to write. And if you literally the Sheikh, probably so technical, and he's very precise in his writing, you have to try to write every word that he says. So there's no stop, there's no worksheet figuring out. There's the book text, and then there's on the side there's a split piece right there. So inshallah, that's just a reminder for us for the rest of the day, inshallah. That this, it can be difficult, so we have to have patience so that we can gain this knowledge. And also another point is that we do actually have a lot of book left. I'm actually looking at how many chapters we have left, and we have a lot of chapters to go through, a lot of points to go through. And I'll try to finish the book if I can. But the main objective that I want from you right now is that if we are not able to go through some of the detailed issues which are mentioned into this book due to the time, then minimum what I want is for you to understand the concepts which are mentioned. So basically, that's abbreviation, at least understand what that is and some of the main conditions alluded to about it. Likewise, the am and khas, or mutlaq, muqayyad, what's the difference between am and mutlaq, things like that. As for the details, then we can maybe if I teach the book again, we have more time, or whatever the case may be, then we can go through and do more details. Right now, because it's a dawra, and that's how dawras generally are. Dawras generally sometimes the objective is not for you to know every single detail, but it's just if you've never studied the book before. I think he mentioned this. He mentioned this in the beginning of the dawra as well. That if you've never studied the book before, then the aim of the dawra is to make you familiar with the concept. And if you are like an intermediate level, then you're learning most, not being familiar, but actually learning most of the ruling. And if you studied before, then you are just segmenting your knowledge. Okay, so that's the benefit of dawrat. But dawrat are better than nothing. But obviously, if you want true knowledge, what's better than dawrat is studying on a day-to-day basis, every single day, taking it slowly and revising and testing and so on. So, for example, one thing I normally do in my lesson at the beginning of every lecture, I test my students on the previous lesson. But I'm not doing this with you because we don't have time to do that. And there have been times that students fail at the second lesson. That's it. But obviously, I'm not doing that with you. And I don't think you'd be happy that you told me, just for me to say more lesson today. So, right, okay, we will continue from where we left off yesterday. We're still under the chapter of Al-Kalam, which is regarding speech. And we looked at speech from different ways. We looked at it from the word itself, from the Arabic language, and we said there were three types, different pairs and how. Then we talked about it from the angle of what type of speech can we say is truthful or a lie, and is that what you want to? And now we are going to talk about the last point in the chapter of Al-Kalam, which is regarding, it's called Al-Haqiqah, Al-Haqiqah wal-Majaz. Al-Haqiqah wal-Majaz. Al-Haqiqah is translated here as the truth, and Al-Majaz is a metaphor. In simple terms, Al-Haqiqah is basically specifically the apparent meaning. The apparent meaning, we're going to explain exactly what it is. And a metaphor is a meaning, but it's not the apparent meaning, but it's like it's another meaning which is intended. Another meaning which is intended. Even though you use a certain word, you don't literally mean that word. You mean something else. Okay? We'll get to the examples and you'll understand it, inshallah. So, and this divide or this splitting into haqiqah wal majaz, this is splitting speech in terms of its usage. Because when you use words, you're either using it as its literal meaning or you're using it as a metaphor. I mean, give you an example in English. If you would say to somebody, for example, get lost, yeah? Does that literally mean going to a jungle so that you don't know where you are? No, it just means go. Yeah? You don't take the literal meaning. So that's what we are talking about over here. And again, it's very important to know this because we need to determine if an ayah or hadith is a literal meaning or is it a metaphor. And and if it is, what are the conditions, and are there metaphors in the Quran or are there not? And so we will discuss all of this, inshallah. So the first, the Sheikh says on top of page 24, the last speech is divided in terms of usage to reality, haqiqah, and metaphor, which is majaz. The first is the reality or the truth. Number one, reality or haqiqah. I probably use the word haqiqah because you should know this Arabic term. Especially in Usul, you should know the Arabic term, but it's very difficult to translate in one word. So haqiqah, the Sheikh gives a definition. He says it is the word used for the meaning it has been placed for. Okay, it is the word which is used for the meaning it has been placed for, such as the lion for a predatory animal. If I say lion, everyone thinks of the animal, right? So that's if I say I saw a lion today, and you all think of that, that's haqiqah. Okay, and that's the foundation. When you speak, with the word that you use, that's the meaning that you mean. Okay, so that's and this example of the Sheikh is quite important because just so you understand now, the Arabs sometimes would say, رَأَيْتُ الْأَسَدَ يَخْطُبُ. I saw a lion giving a football. Right. What does that mean? Does that mean if you saw the animal? No, you saw a courageous man, and so on. So it's referring to a man, but is used a lion because it's characteristic because of how fierce and how brave and how courageous that man may be. So that example, I saw a lion giving a football. That will come under the second. That will come under the second, which is called majaz. Very good. And then the second they say you go to the urf meaning, the customary meaning. However, you have to be a bit more precise when you talk about like the Quran and Sunnah. You mean the customs of the Sahaba, the urf of the Sahaba, because the Quran was spoken to them. It was spoken to them. And then lastly, you go to the linguistic meaning. And there are some ulama that may differ in the second and third. Some ulama might give preference to the linguistic meaning sometimes. But what I mentioned, that's what happens most of the time. So we'll stick to that for now, inshallah. And as you know, Ibn Hussein indicated towards earlier, we are not talking about, when you say linguistic meaning, if that linguistic meaning is never used whatsoever, like if you say that word, nobody can even if you were to ask them, what's the linguistic meaning in the language, what does it mean? They don't know. Then we're not talking about those type of meanings. So even those scholars that make a preference to the linguistic meaning over the urfi meaning, then if a word comes with where the linguistic meaning is no longer used at all, then that meaning is not looked at. So it's like there's no meaning for that. It's like you can skip over that and move on to the next stage. So if the regards to linguistic, we said the three orders, Shari'i meaning, Urfi of the Sahaba, and then the linguistic meaning. Some ulama have placed the last two, they differ. So some ulama have put linguistic and then Urfi last. That's a very simple issue. But the point I want to say is that when we talk about linguistic meaning, we are not referring to the linguistic meaning that is no longer used by the people. So if we have a certain word, that no longer, if you were to ask the people what its linguistic meaning, okay, what's its linguistic meaning? Nobody has a clue whatsoever. Nobody ever uses that meaning. That's the meaning where maybe you might have used centuries ago, but no one uses it now. Yeah. If that is the case, then we don't look. Then that linguistic meaning doesn't really have any weight to it. So we don't that, even though there is a meaning, but because it's neglected, then it's as though it's not even there. So if we take the other opinion, the ulama say Shari'i meaning, and then the linguistic meaning, and then the urfi meaning, if a word comes where the linguistic meaning is no longer used at all, then we skip that and go through the urfi meaning. How many linguistic meaning? You could say common linguistic meaning. Meaning something where the people know.
How did they reach to this, that this is a Sharia meaning, the methodology to reach that this is Sharia meaning? How do you understand this is Sharia?
Just from just gathering all the different texts together and realizing. So for example, whenever Allah talks about Salah, or whenever the Prophet ﷺ talked about Salah, in those contexts, for example, the Prophet said to a Sahabi, Salah, pray, using your Salah. So then the Sahaba went and he did those actions. So we realized, okay, the Islamic meaning of Salah is this. So there's ways of working it out. You have to look at the text, and maybe you have to gather a few texts together and so on. But there's different ways of working it out. Okay, so this is regarding al-haqiqah. Now we can move on to al-majaz. Al-majaz, the metaphor, is a word used for other than the purpose it was intended. Okay, so this is the opposite of haqiqah. So you're using it for the opposite, or not opposite, but for other than the purpose it was intended for it to be used. For example, a lion for a brave man. I saw a lion giving a khutbah. You mean a brave man giving a khutbah. Has the word lion been placed to mean a brave man? No, it's the meaning. What's the meaning of lion? The animal. So you're using the word for the reason it has not been placed for, or it has not been intended to be used for. And then Sheikh carries on, so what is excluded from our statement used are the unused words, which is neither a reality nor a metaphor, and what is not included by the words for other than the purpose it was intended is reality, meaning haqiqah. That's the explanation of the definition, but I think it's straightforward. It is not permissible to load a word intending its metaphoric meaning, except with a correct proof that prevents the realistic meaning being intended, and it is known in the field of eloquence as qarina. The condition of using a word for its metaphorical meaning is the presence of a link between the realistic meaning and the metaphorical meaning. So the expression is correct, and this is no one in the knowledge of bayan, eloquence. That's one of the subcategories of the science of balagha. Ilm al-bayan is one of the subcategories of the science of balagha, as in, and it is either through similarity or otherwise. So if it is similarity, then it is called at-tajawuz, as in the case with the word lion for a brave man. Okay, I'll just stop here. So basically, the Sheikh has basically mentioned, to summarize this, is that you are not allowed to intend by a statement that you say the majazi. You can't go to the majazi meaning, a metaphorical meaning, unless there are two conditions which are fulfilled. Unless there are two conditions which are fulfilled. You can't just turn around and say that, oh, by this sentence, I was doing majaz, I didn't mean what I said, I meant something else. Okay? You can only say that if two conditions are fulfilled. Firstly, the Sheikh says, except with a correct proof that prevents the realistic meaning being intended. So the first is that there is a correct proof which prevents the haqiqi meaning being used. And that is known as a qarina. So another way you can word this condition is that there has to be a qarina. There has to be a qarina. And what does qarina mean? A correct proof that prevents the haqiqi meaning being used. Okay. So I mean, we can just, if you stick to the same example of the line given on khutbah. Now, what's the dalil? The dalil is that there's no way. How is a lion going to speak? How it's not possible for a lion to give a khutbah. Okay, so that's a proof that the haqiqi meaning is not intended. It shows that there's another meaning which is intended. That's the first condition. The second condition is that, this is the next paragraph, in the second line, is the presence of a link between the realistic meaning and the metaphorical meaning. There has to be a link. There has to be a link for that. So for example, let's say you went to somebody and he was, I don't know, let's just say that you call him a lion, but you call him a lion because he was small, for example. So what's the link between a lion and being small? Lions are generally, if anything, compared to other animals, are bigger. So you can't say, oh, no, what I meant is that he was small. Or you can't say that because there's no link. So that would be incorrect for a person to say. That would be incorrect for a person to say. But if you said, what I meant by him being a lion is that he's brave and fierce, you say, oh yeah, that's correct. Because then there's a link. Because a lion, normally you perceive it to be something which is brave and powerful and so on. So the second condition is that there has to be a link between them. Okay, and the types of links are many. The types of links are many. We don't go into them at the moment. But the Sheikh just mentioned two types of majaz now. Okay. The Sheikh just mentioned one. No. Okay. So he mentions one, but there's one. So he says now, he does mention one of the ways that it can be linked. Or he mentions two in total. The first one is as it is either through similarity or otherwise. Similarity or otherwise. Okay, so what are these links? Like I said, there are many. The Sheikh mentions two. The first type of link is similarity. The first type of link is similarity or otherwise, and the other, and then other than similarity. I'll mention some examples of that, inshallah. Okay. So an example of similarity is that between the two things that you are trying to do this majaz between, then there's something which is similar, or there's a characteristic, or there's a certain description which is similar between the two. So again, if you use the same example of the lion,
a lion, he has that characteristic of being fierce and powerful and so on, and that could be found in this person. So that's what the link here is being similar. As another example is when sometimes you could refer to a woman as the moon, and the similarity is they say beauty, because the moon at night can be beautiful. So likewise, a woman could be also. So if a person was to say, I saw the moon walking on the street, okay, then when he says what I meant by moon was a woman, is that correct in terms of? You shouldn't be looking. You shouldn't be. But in terms of linguistic, in terms of the majaz, is that majaz correct or not? It's correct because that characteristic is found in both. And the only reason I mentioned that is because it's mentioned here in the book in front of me. Okay? Yeah, so in the first example, the similarity was courage and being brave, and in second, it was so that is in regards to similarity. And if that is present, then that type of majaz is called at-tajawuz, or it's called isti'ara. The Sheikh mentioned both of them. At-tajawuz, isti'ara. This means what isti'ara. He mentioned it there, borrowing, because you kind of borrowed that characteristic and applied it to this other person. As in the case with the word lion for a brave man. And if it is not similar, so this is the second type, then it is called tajawuz majaz mursal. That's the main word. Majaz mursal. So this is the second type that we are talking about now. Is that mursal? Mursal. The first one is isti'ara. Isti'ara. It says it there in the second to last line of that paragraph. The first one, isti'ara. And then in the next paragraph, in the second line, halfway through, at the end of the first line, majaz mursal. Majaz mursal. Okay. And the Sheikh will give a number of examples of these. So go to the next paragraph. He says an example of he uses the English word, but I want to stick to Arabic. Majaz mursal. An example of majaz mursal is to say we took care of the rain. We took care of the rain. Now, what they actually don't mean, what do they mean by they took care of the rain? This is referring to taking care of the plants and making sure that there's not too much rain on the plants or anything like that. So in reality, they actually took care of the plants. Okay, but this is called in Arabic as-sababiyya, because the reason they had to take care of the plants was the rain. The reason that they had to take care of the plants was the rain. So they just use the word rain because. So what's the link here? The link here is the reason. The link here is the reason because the reason they had to take care of the plants was due to the rain. That is the link. So this is Arabic. Don't try to always think about it in English. It might not make sense in English, but in Arabic, if somebody used to say Ra'ina al-Matar, we took care of the rain, then what they mean is that we took care of the plants and cleaned everything up and all of that. Okay? So they mean the plants and nabat. Okay? Now, if somebody came to you and he said, look, this is majaz, because even though they said the word rain, they actually mean the plants. Okay? They say to you, okay, one of the conditions, the second condition is that there has to be a link. There has to be a link. And it's not the first type of link, similarity, there's no similarity. So we say it's a second type. And the second type of link is called majaz mursal, and this is many types. One of them is because it's the reason. The reason they had to take care of the plants is due to the rain. Then that's the link between them because it is the reason. There's another example which is similar to the reason as well, which is the next one, which may make a little bit more sense to you, inshallah. An instance of a psychological metaphor is the rain has given growth to the pastures. The wording of the Sheikh, sometimes Arabic makes more sense than the English. It says, oh no, grass. Pastures basically means grass. Okay, basically plants. Rain has given growth to the plants. The Sheikh says, so the meaning of the word in real terms is what is meant. But to attribute the growth to the rain in a metaphorical is metaphorical in use because the one who really causes growth is Allah. So it is the Jawaz an attribution. Who is the one that caused the plants to grow? Allah. But is it permissible to say that the rain did it? It is because it was a means. It was the means for the grass and the plants to grow. So this is a type of majaz, which is a bit more trickier than the first. The first, which is similarity, but it's still a type of majaz. Another example in the Quran, Allah says, وَيُنَزِّلُ عَلَيْكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ رِزْقًا. Allah sends down from the heavens rizq, provisions. Right, there was a nice 3-course meal and everything just come from the heavens like that. No, what comes down? Rain comes down, and from the rain plants grow and we make food for that. So because and this is again it's a reasoning, but it's the other side of the reasoning. It's rain was the reason, and the end product was the risk. So Allah mentioned the end product in this ayah. So that is, upon the opinion that we're going to talk about is the majaz in the Quran or not. Upon the opinion that there is, this would be considered majaz. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Also, from the use of majaz is the addition and omission. This is other types of majaz mursal, addition and omission, meaning that there are extra words in the sentence, or omission, or there are less words in the sentence. An example, and subhanAllah, I don't know if you realize, this is why the ulama say Usul needs to learn Arabic. It makes a lot more sense in Arabic. But I'll try to explain it so that you understand it. Al-Hazf wal-Idafa, or Az-Ziyada. Az-Ziyada is addition, and omission is Hazf. An example of which is a statement of Allah the Most High, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. The word kaf has the exact same meaning as the word mithl. Okay? If I say huwa mithl asad, he is like a lion. Huwa kal asad, he is like a lion. Same meaning. So the fact that put two together, the Sheikh says, it is said that the letter kaf is extra. So this is the extra, this addition. Okay? But obviously there's nothing extra in the Quran, meaning extra in the sense that there's no benefit. There's obviously a benefit to it. So the Sheikh mentions it's extra for the purpose of highlighting the negation of anything like unto Allah. So it's just extra emphasis onto the meaning that there is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, Laysa kamithlihi shay. If he said Laysa mithluhu shay, in English it would be the same. There's nothing like Allah. But in Arabic, you realize that a kaf is also there. And what's the meaning of it? It's in terms of meaning, to give more emphasis. And in terms of the balagha side that we are talking about, it is majaz, because they say it is extra. An example of a metaphor majaz by omission, I take something out, and this we use in English. So this inshallah might be a bit more makes more sense. Was'al al-qarya, ask the village. Okay, now if I say to you, ask the village, do you go and start speaking to the walls and talk? Or do you go and speak to the people of the village? People of the village. So that's what's here. There's a word which is omitted, taken out, erased, not there, which is a hidden word, which is people. Okay? So the Sheikh says, ask the people of the village. Okay? So the word people is omitted for a metaphorical purpose, and there are numerous types of such metaphorical instances that are listed in the sciences of bayan. Okay? So these are all different types of majaz. Okay? The point being is that hopefully mainly you understand what is majaz, as the details of each one and examples. Don't worry about that too much. So inshallah you understand the different types, and that majaz, when we talk about having that link, the first condition is that there has to be a proof to show that the meaning is not intended. So for example, was'al al-qarya, it's clear that you're not going to start a conversation with the world and so on. And the second is that there has to be a link, and the link is of two types. The link is either similarity, that's the first type, and then the second type is other types. It's called majaz mursal, and the different types. So if you want likewise on the if you draw on the board to make it easier for you, okay, I'll draw this on the board inshallah. It's summarized. we can basically summarize what we have taken. Very simple, inshallah.
While it was there.
And you doing graphs like this, I do have to do them. It makes everything else, especially revision, a lot easier. Okay, so okay. We have al-majaz, or even before that, sorry. Okay. Again, I'm gonna write in Arabic. I'll translate, and if you want to write in English, it's up to you. If you don't write Arabic, you can. The title is speech from the angle of its usage. From the angle of its usage. So we initially split it into what are the two types? What are the two types of speech? Haqiqa and majaz. The first is al-haqiqa. And the second is al-majaz. Okay. Haqiqa, the reality, and majaz. Yeah, we just explained the metaphor. And haqiqa is three types.
Sharia.
The first one is haqiqa shar'iyya. Urfiyya, which is the customs. And number three is haqiqa
Linguistic.
linguistically very good. Okay. And we also mentioned that if you want, you can do this any way you want, but if you want to put like an example under each one, that's so if you don't remember, you want to put a example, that's up to you. Okay, I'm just doing the summary so you understand. And if you want as well, you can also remember we talked about if you don't know which one it is, then which one do you give preference to?
Yeah, that's
So,
Sharia.
so you can just put like so Fiqh and short in the speech of legislation in the Quran and Sunnah. That's very important because that's when you look in the Quran and Sunnah. If you're looking at the speech of the people, then it's slightly different. I don't want to go into that. So, for example, if you are a judge in a court, now you're dealing with the Quran, so you're dealing with the people. So let's say a man said, I said this to my wife, for example, which meaning do you take? Okay, that's separate, that's a different issue space. Okay, which I don't want to go into right now. We'll just focus on kalam shar in the speech of the legislation, i.e. the Quran and Sunnah. So the first one is what? Which meaning do you give preference to?
Sharia.
Sharia. And then number two?
Urfiyya, the speech of the Sahaba.
Of the Sahaba. So we don't, when we say Urfiyya, we don't mean the Urf of the people now. Okay? So time of the Sahaba, it was to them it was revealed. And lastly is Nabawi. Okay? So I'll say again in English for those that want English. Speech split from the angle of its usage, haqiqa, reality, majaz, metaphor. Reality splits into three: the Islamic meaning, the customary meaning, linguistic meaning. And if you don't know, and there's a contradiction and you don't know which one to take, is the Shari'i meaning, the Islamic meaning, i.e. the Sahaba, and thirdly, the linguistic meaning. Okay. As for majaz, then for two conditions, very good. There are two conditions, so Okay. I'm just going to put one word. If you do want the whole sentence, check please. You can. But the first condition, okay, here that's a sharpan, meaning two conditions. Okay, and I put that there just to make us realize that this is two conditions, not two types. Two conditions. First is qarina. What does qarina mean?
Hakika meaning is not used.
No. No.
The
Qarina. What does qarina mean again? Find it. What does qarina mean?
correct proof which prevents
Good. A correct proof which prevents the haqiqi meaning being used. That's what it means by qarina. And alaqa means link, meaning there has to be a correct link between the two things that you're doing in majaz between. So that's qarina, it's quite straightforward. And alaqa, we said that, we mentioned basically two types of alaqa. Okay, the first is similarity. Similarity. So, for example, we give an example of the lion, and we also give the example of the moon. That is a characteristic or something which is similar between the two. So, for that reason, and then the second is majaz mursal. What's this called again? So if it says isti'ara. Isti'ara. So mushabaha means similarity. So if there is a similarity, that a technical term for that is isti'ara. And here it's not a غير mushabaha. Known as majaz. And these are different types. So number one was the seven. Okay, the seven. So that's the example that we gave regarding. Why have we mentioned the rain? Because even though we plants, but there was a reason why we have to be careful. Number two is it's called al-musabbab. Musabbab. Okay. That's the same as reasoning, except we don't look at the reason, we look at the natija, the end product. So when Allah sends down from the sky provisions, we mean rain. Because why have we used the word rizq? Because it's musabbab, it's the end product of the rain. From that rain we have water which we can drink, and water that we can use for plants, and water that we can use for so many things. So it leads to provision. So both of these are the same, they both do with reason, except this is the reason itself, and that is the end product. And then we had number three is ziyada. Okay, the extra word, basically Sheikh. And lastly we had has وصل القرية أست village. So that's basically a summary of what we have just taken. So any questions? Does that make sense? Qarina. Who wants to answer? What does qarina mean? Qarina is a word that means something. Qarina. A correct proof which prevents the haqiqi meaning. Because when you summarize, practically at least. But like I said, if you want to add more, that is totally up to you. So if you want to add an example underneath, Sharia, Salah, meaning the act of worship. Urfiya, Dabba, referring to, even though linguistically anything on the earth, but referring to four legs. Lughawi, again, Salah, meaning dua. You can, that's what how you want to do it. But this is one way, I think.
Translation for this.
Which one? Last one. So if you look, majaz, two conditions, shartan, qarina and alaqa. Alaqa means link. That's i.e. it has to be a link between the two things that you use in majaz between. And the link is of two types. Mushabaha. Mushabaha means similarity. Okay, and if that is the case, the technical term is isti'ara. So, for example, the example of the asad, the lion, that's majaz. If you want to be more precise, it's isti'ara. It's called isti'ara. If you want to be really precise. So majaz is obviously like a big word. If you're really precise, it's isti'ara. And غير mushabaha, meaning there's no similarity. There's no similarity. And that is known as majaz mursal. Okay? And the words underneath it, the first one is as-sabab, which is reasoning. Number two is al-musabbab, which is the end product of the reason, like the provisions. Okay? So rain is the reason, and the end product is the provision. So you use that rain and you mean provision. And number three is ziyada, extra, additional, and has is something which has been omitted or erased or removed. Yeah. Right, we need to carry on to the next chapter, inshallah. Actually, I think there's one more issue before we do. Yeah, ask the village. So what has been removed? People, ask the people of the village. Very good. He says, here only some types of the reality of metaphor and usul can be mentioned due to the fact that the meaning of words is either real or metaphoric, so the need arose to make each one known and the ruling, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And there is an issue, there is one issue that I want to quickly mention before we move on to the next chapter. Is there majaz in the Quran? Is there majaz in the Quran? I pause so they can write it down. Now there's actually about 4 or 5 opinions. I'm just going to mention 2 because these 2 are the main 2 opinions. The first opinion is that yes, there is. And this is the majority of the ulama who say yes. And the proof is, the examples that we given, that it takes place. The second opinion, which I want to mention, is that no, there is no majaz in the Quran. And this is the opinion of Sheikh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. The opinion of Sheikh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn al-Qayyim, the student Ibn al-Qayyim. Sheikh Mohammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti. Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti, the one who wrote the Tafsir. And also Ibn Athaymin. And their proof is that all of these terminologies, and to apply them to the Quran, this is something that actually took place after the time of the Salaf. So all these types were not known at the time of the Salaf, nor have these wordings and these terminologies been mentioned by the original scholars of Arabic language, such as Sibawayh, Khalil, and others. Rather, this is actually added on later by Ahl al-Bid'ah, such as the Mu'tazila. And the reason they did this is so that they can make all of the sifat of Allah, all of the names and attributes and characteristics of Allah, to make all of them metaphors. So you say Allah has a hand, this is a metaphor, it means something else. Okay? So you say that when all of these varieties been added, this is by Al-Bid'ah, they added them in so that they can try to prove that they can try to interpret and use all of the sifat of Allah as metaphors. And as Ahlul Sunnah, we believe that the attributes of Allah, we take them as they are. Okay. However, when it comes to the details and how, that we don't know. Allah has a hand, we agree, or we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand. How or what does that hand look like? That we don't know, because something that Allah and His Messenger have not explained. And in fact, as Imam Malik said, asking about it is a form of innovation. Okay, so if that is their dalil that this is not something known at time with Salaf, not even the ulama of Arabic language, what were these ayat? Some of the ayat that we mentioned, aren't they actually a majaz? And they say no. They say in fact, all of these an answer can be given. The general answer that I gave is from Usul al-Arab. It's the way the Arabs used to speak. So all of these can be given an answer other than using majaz. So for example, it might be hard to explain some of the examples because if you don't know Arabic, then it's hard to explain the example. But for example, was al-Qariya, ask the Qariya, then those that know maybe Arabic, Qariya would have been mudaf ilayh, and a mudaf which is ahl, that is removed. And it's known in the Arabic language that if something is well known, that sometimes the mudaf can be taken away. Okay? If you don't know Arabic, that probably going to head. If you do know, what's that? Yeah, Muhammad. So it's known in Arabic that sometimes the thing which is being possessed, then if that is known, then the mudaf, the possessor, can be taken away. And those, if you study Arabic, you see that this is happening. That's just an example. I'm not going to go through every single example, every single ayah that we mentioned, but that's how they answer. So what is their answer to Allah, the ayat that we have mentioned? This is from Usul al-Arab. This is the way the Arabs speak. Okay, so all of these, they're not actually metaphors, but an answer can be given from the Arabic language. And then they actually go to their books such as Al-Iman by Ibn Taymiyyah, or Mukhtasar al-Sawa'iq al-Mursala, or Man'u Jawaz al-Majaz by Shanqiti. Some books, they actually in depth, they go through each of these ayahs. Even those from Ahlul Sunnah that take the first opinion saying that there may be majaz in the Quran, then everyone agrees that this is outside of the attributes of Allah. The names and attributes of Allah, it's not in that, because that is something we don't have knowledge about, so we can't do majaz. So we don't have the need to show that the correct meaning, the haqiqi meaning is not there, nor is there a link, because this there's nothing like Allah. So what can Allah be similar to, for example? I think nothing.
So this is only for regarding the Quran, but what about hadith?
Hadith
Hadith as well. But there's like, for instance, this example, Rasulullah said that will it be you get dirty if you are staying very near to the street and washing yourself many times.
You get dirty.
If there is a river outside, yeah.
Oh. So they discussed on that as an example. He said as an example, and then the Prophet said, you will be purified from the, that's an example, that's not majaz. That's not an example, not majaz. Okay, then we need to move on to the next topic. Subhanallah. The next chapter is command, al-amr. Right. So again, we are still now, we're carrying on from speech, because now we are all talking about dalalat al-alfaz, different types of speech. So another type of speech is amr, commandments. Okay. Now this is from the greatest chapters in kalam, because in speech, because many of the time when we are, how do we know should we do something or not? It's a command. It's a command by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sheikh gives a definition. The definition of a command is a statement that includes the request of an action by way of a higher authority. Okay, that basically means that a command is normally somebody higher up is telling you. Okay, so the father tells the son. It's not, command is not son telling the father. Okay, that in Arabic wouldn't be called amr. The child says to his father, can you give me that cup, or give me that cup? Yeah. Then even though linguistically, it might be called, the word is fair amr, they wouldn't call that amr. They would call it maybe a type of dua or a type of, there's no one for iltimas and so on. I don't want to go into them at the time. But the point being is that command normally comes from higher ups. Allah commands us. Okay? Such as establish the prayer and pay the zakat. It comes many times in the Quran. And then the Sheikh explains the definition, and I think that's quite straightforward, so you can skip the explanation of skip the explanation of that. Okay, now we move on to the forms of command. I.e., this is in Arabic, siyahu al-amr. Siyahu is a plural of siyah, in the different forms of commands. In other words, how do you know if this word is a command? What are the different forms that you can find commandments in the Quran? That's what we are talking about now. The different forms that you will be able to find commandments in the Quran. Okay, and these are two types. These commandments, sorry, these forms are two types. So I'm not going to draw it, but if you want to, you could draw it yourself. The first type and second type. The first type would be those which are clear cut. Those which are clear cut. Sorry. Sorry, the sword. And the second is غير الصريحة. So first is الصيغ الصريحة, and the second is غير الصريحة, i.e. either not direct / not clear cut. So let's go through them. In terms of those which are clear cut, then the Sheikh mentions four. The first is فعل الأمر. فعل الأمر, we took this yesterday, you remember? A command. Okay, the word itself is a command. Okay. So for example, imperative verb, commanding verb.
पापा फोन किया था तुमको क्या बोल रहे थे
देर होगा अब्बू का आने में देर होगा वहाँ रिसीव करे इलेक्शन वाला सामान
हाँ सर राइट लगाऊंगा ना पापा को भेज दिए हमको
The second, see, English is not hard to explain. The imperative verbal noun, this is called ism fi'l amr. Ism fi'l amr. So he's given an example, come to the prayer, which is hayya ala salah. Hayya is actually not a fi'l, it's actually an ism, it's a noun. In Arabic language, it's actually a noun. However, what's the meaning of it? The meaning is a command, which means to come. Okay, so this is called ism fi'l amr, meaning it's a noun, it's classified as a noun, but the meaning is a command. So they would say that that is another form of commandment using an ism fi'l amr. If you don't know Arabic, you know some of these words, don't worry about them too much. Basically, a noun that has a meaning of a command. The third, but those which are clear cut, they're more to do with the language itself. Okay, so you know, if you don't understand it 100%, please don't worry about it and focus on the things that are a bit more clear. So those which are not clear cut, you'll understand them a lot more easily, inshallah. The third is the verbal noun that is used in the place of an imperative verb, and this is basically al-masdar. Al-masdar. Anyone, okay? Al-masdar. Masdar now. Okay, and I'll give you an example. So this is not an ayah or something, but I'm looking at some of these examples here. And let me give you an example first, and I'll mention an ayah. If I say the word qira'ah means reciting or reading. Okay, it's just a name of the action, right? So in certain circumstances, Allah could say He used this word. Okay, but the word, even though it translates to the name of the action, the intended meaning is commanding you to do the action. So I'll give you an example, right? So Allah in Surah Baqarah, He says, فَالصِّيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ. Siyam is the name for fasting. Okay, ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ is 3 days. So when Allah talks about this, Allah is mentioning, what He means is that you have to fast for 3 days. You have to fast for 3 days. But instead of using the verb, He's used something called a masdar, which is the name of the action, but the intended meaning behind it is a command. And the last and the fourth one is the present tense verb joined with the lam of the imperative, which is amr. I skipped the example that Sheikh mentioned here. The example, the third one, فَإِذَا لَقِيتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ. ضَرْبٌ is a masdar. The actual command would be إِضْرِب, or so it would be فَضْرِب الرِّقَابِ. That's what it would be. But Allah used the masdar. And as you can see in the translation, they translated it with the meaning, which is strike or to hit. Okay. The number 4, present tense verb joined with the lam of imperative. ذَلِكَ لِتُؤْمِنُوا. Those, if you know present tense, tu'minu means you believe or you are believing. It's a present tense, okay? So because that lam in the beginning, لِتُؤْمِنُوا, okay? I don't want to talk about the noon, but we are not doing that. But the fact that the lam has been added to a present tense verb, then that gives a meaning of a command. That's something known in Arabic. It's called lam al-amr. It's called lam al-amr. So, لذلك لتؤمنوا بالله is commanding you to believe in Allah and His Messenger. So these are the ones which are clear cut, okay? And when we clear cut, meaning the Arabic language, okay? Now we're going to move on to those which are maybe not as clear, which is called غير صريحة, which is not clear cut or indirect, okay? So the Sheikh, he says, commands can also be used using other than the normal forms, as mentioned above, such as something being described as fard. So if you say this is fard, then that's a type of commandment. So that's number one. And what we mean by commandment, meaning it would come under the chapter of Amr, chapter of commandments. Okay? Because a command is what? When a commandment is there, it shows that you have to do it. So you say fard, that shows you have to do it. So it comes under this chapter. So if you want to learn about commandments and obligations, and not the meaning of the word wajib, that's different. But in terms of, let's say, this action is wajib, and some of the rulings regarding, or this action is fard, and a ruling regarding this fard, meaning do I have to do it straight away, or can an obligatory action be delayed till later on, then it would come under this chapter of Bab al-Amr, because it would come under commandments. Because commandments we study, do you have to do a commandment straight away? We're going to get to some of those issues. So an indirect way of it being a command is describing it as fard, that's number 1, or as wajib, which is number 2. So for example, the Prophet said, غُسْلُ الْجُمْعَةِ وَاجِبٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُحْتَلِمٍ. Doing a ghusl on the day of Jum'ah is wajib. So that's a command. Okay, so it's command. However, correct opinion is that it's actually mustahab or not wajib, but that's due to other reasons which I don't want to mention right now. But the point being, whenever an example is given, it's not necessarily given to tell you the correct opinion on the issue. It's just giving you the examples for you to understand the issue that we're talking about. The next is obedience, ta'ah, to describe something as being ta'ah. مَنْ يُطِعَ الرَّسُولِ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ. Whoever obeys the messenger, that he has obeyed Allah. We commanded to obey the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another one that you could add, which we checked in here, is describing something as maktub, written, kutiba alaykum as-siyam.
So basically, I think all the terms which are used for
all the different terms that will come under that this is considered a commandment. So kutiba alaykum as-siyam, we are commanded to fast. Obviously, this is غير صريحة, because it's not any of the forms that do this, or it's not like a form in Arabic that shows directly it's a command. So that's why it comes in the غير صريحة.
even this thing like it's command, but it's not like command.
Yes, that's what the Sheikh. Did I skip the word? That is skip the word. Mandub. No. Mandub comes there. The Sheikh mentioned mandub. That would also come. Obviously, that command is without the obligation. Yeah, without the obligation. Or praising the perpetrator, meaning praising the one doing the action. So if there's whoever does this action, he is this, or he, and so on. Allah praises this person, that shows that we are commanded to do that action. Or dispraising the one who leaves it. Okay? Or dispraising the one who leaves it. So Allah, describes this person in a bad manner, dispraises him, then that shows that we are commanded to not do that action. Or when a reward is connected to it, and Allah says, whoever does this action, and his reward is this, his reward is Jannah, his reward is this, and so on, that shows that we are commanded to do that action. And lastly, or that to leave it would be punishable. Whoever leaves this off, then his punishment is this, and that. That shows that the action is, we are commanded to not do that action. We are commanded not to do that action. So these are different forms of commandments in the Quran. So how do you know, are we commanded to do this in the Quran or not? Either you have the 4 ways which are Saliha, or the other ways. How many? Anyone number? Anyone number? There must be one alone. Or there's more. Fard, wajib, mandub, obedience, praising, dispraising, reward, and punishment. The Sheikh mentioned 8 different ways. And then we added one. Maktub, so that makes it 9. Right, now another issue regarding commandments. What the wording of command necessitates. What the wording of command necessitates. Meaning, if we see a commandment, what does that mean? If we see a commandment in the Quran, what does that mean? The command, when not restricted by other factors, necessitates the obligation of what is being commanded and immediately carrying it out. The Sheikh talks about 2 issues here. The Sheikh talks about 2 issues. The first issue is that when a command comes, that show, and it's unrestricted. Unrestricted, we mentioned this yesterday. Unrestricted meaning there's no, other hadith which restricts this hadith or looks like it's contradicting or anything like that. Just this ayah by itself. Okay, what does that show us? Okay, what does that show? We're gonna talk about shortly if there's another ayah or nothing. What does that commandment mean in that case? We're gonna get to it after this issue, inshallah. But right now, a ayah by itself, there's a commandment. What does that mean? What does that mean? The Sheikh, the first thing he says, it necessitates the obligation of what is being commanded. That's the first. The first is that it means that it is an obligation for us. So a command is an obligation. And that's why the ulama normally define it as al-amr al-mutlaq yaqtadi al-wujub. An unrestricted command necessitates obligation. It necessitates obligation. So that's the first point that the Sheikh mentioned. He's going to mention the proofs for it in a second. And the second is and immediately carrying it out. Immediately carrying out. The second is that it's obligatory upon you to do it as soon as possible. As soon as possible. That's the second point that he is talking about. And when you say doing it as soon as possible, we don't mean al-wajib al-muwassa. Wajib al-muwassa. So if you have a time where you're able to do it, okay, then as long as you do it within that time, you're fine. Okay, but for example, something which is unrestricted Hajj, okay, then it's obligatory to do Hajj whenever you are able to do so. Whenever you have obviously if you don't have the money or the physical strength, that's a different issue. So if you have the ability to do so, it's obligatory to do the Hajj straight away. Likewise with Zakah, as soon as the time for the year finishes and you do Zakah, it's obligatory to do it straight away. What are the proofs for this? The Sheikh mentioned the proofs for this individually. So he says, from the evidences that it necessitates obligation. So this Usuli principle, where did we get it from? Where did the ulama get this Usuli principle from? Remember we said the first madhab, which is that they extract the rulings from the Adillah from the Quran. The Sheikh is going to mention a proof. So that we know we're not blind following the Sheikh, he's taking it from the ayat and the hadith. The Sheikh, I think he's just going to mention one. Yeah, because it's a beginner's book, he's just going to mention one. So what is the proof that if a commandment comes, it means that it is an obligation? He mentioned the ayah, page 30, فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ أَنْ تُصِيبَهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. So let those beware who dissent by different يُخَالِفُونَ from the Prophet's order. So this amrihi, command, order or command. Meaning those who tell us from the Prophet's command, lest fitna strike them or a painful punishment. Okay, so either they'll be afflicted with fitna or, and Imam Ahmad, Imam Ahmad, he said fitna in this ayah refers to shirk or a painful punishment. Meaning, those who do not follow the commands of the Prophet, then one of two things will happen: fitna will strike them, or they will be punished. And if you will be punished, what does that show? shows that you have to follow the commands.
लेकिन इंग्लिश में पढ़ावत है हर
Follow
वक्त
the commands,
मतलब
that
क्लास
it's obligatory to follow the commands. So that's how they got, that's how they extracted that usul principle, that whenever a command comes, it shows that it is obligatory, it shows that it is or necessitates obligation. Hence the principle, an unrestricted command necessitates obligation. Make sense? Okay. The next, the significance of this verse is that Allah has warned those violating for the commands of the Prophet ﷺ to beware of the fitna befalling them, which is a deviation, or that a painful punishment strikes them, such as a warning, can only be for leaving something which is obligatory. All of this indicates that the general commands of the Prophet ﷺ must be acted upon. Right. We'll stop here, inshallah, and I'll give you a quick 5-minute break till 4:45 to continue at 4:45, inshallah.